Chapter 1. How I Learned Vocabulary. It was a Tuesday morning when I walked into class, and one of the students raised an interesting question to our professor. She asked, "What is the best way to learn new vocabulary?" Our professor responded that there are many ways to learn vocabulary, but according to research, the most effective method is reading. He explained that when we read, we naturally absorb twice as much new vocabulary compared to people who do not read. He recommended that we aim to read at least 30 minutes every day. I remember this moment vividly because it made me realize just how important reading is in language learning. For me, reading became a habit that not only expanded my vocabulary but also improved my grammar and comprehension. Example: I decided to read books that truly interested me, such as novels or articles related to my favorite topics, like travel. One day, while reading a travel blog, I came across the word adventure in a sentence. Chapter 2. How I Learned Grammar. The adventure was full of surprises. I didn't know the word at first, but I used a dictionary to understand that adventure means an exciting experience or journey. From that moment, I made sure to incorporate the word into my vocabulary. Every time I came across the word again, it became more familiar and natural to me. This is why reading is so powerful. It helps you remember words in context, not just as isolated definitions. The key to learning vocabulary through reading is to choose books or articles that suit your interests and level. If the material is too difficult or not enjoyable, you might lose motivation. So, always pick something you're excited about. Reading not only helps you learn new words, but also allows you to see how those words fit together in sentences, giving you a better understanding of grammar and syntax. Chapter 3. How I Improved My Pronunciation. After my shift at the cafe, I returned to class, where our professor had an intriguing question from another student. She asked, "Sometimes, when I speak, I'm not sure if I'm using the correct grammar. What should I do to improve my grammar?" Our professor explained that there are two types of students learning English. One group learns to communicate, while the other learns for exams. If you're learning to communicate, the professor offered some practical advice. Example: in your native language, you don't memorize grammar rules directly, right? You learn grammar naturally by being exposed to it. The same applies to English. Instead of learning grammar rules theoretically, you can learn them through practice, exposure, and immersion. For example, when you read a sentence like, "She is playing the piano," you don't need to memorize a rule for the present continuous tense. For example, is plus verb plus ing. You simply notice that playing is the action, and it's happening right now. To improve grammar, the professor suggested a technique called shadowing. Shadowing is a method where you mimic the speaker's words, tone, and rhythm right after you hear them. Example: Imagine you're listening to a podcast and you hear the sentence, "They have been waiting for 2 hours." Instead of just listening, try to repeat the sentence immediately after you hear it. By doing this over and over, you'll get used to the structure and flow of English sentences. The key is consistency. The more you practice, the more grammar will become second nature. One day, another student from South Korea raised her hand and asked, "I want to improve my pronunciation, but I'm not confident. What's the best way to sound more like a native speaker?" Our professor smiled and said, "It's all about practice. The more you listen and repeat, the better your pronunciation will get. One great technique is shadowing." Example: let's say you're listening to an audio clip and you hear the sentence, "It's a beautiful day." Instead of just listening, immediately repeat the sentence out loud, mimicking the speaker's tone, rhythm, and pronunciation. Pay close attention to the small details, like the way the speaker stresses certain words and how the sentence flows. By practicing this, you'll improve both your pronunciation and your understanding of the natural rhythm of English. In addition to shadowing, it's essential to record yourself speaking. Listen to your recordings and compare them with native speakers. This allows you to identify areas where you might need improvement and track your progress over time. Another method I found helpful was working with minimal pairs, words that are similar in sound but have different meanings, like ship and sheep or bat and bet. Practicing these pairs will help you fine-tune your pronunciation. Chapter 4: The Technique of Thinking Aloud. One student, Elizabeth, shared her experience of using a technique called thinking aloud. She explained that when she first started learning English, she struggled to think and speak in English. However, when she began thinking aloud in English, she noticed that her speaking skills improved rapidly. Example: Elizabeth began with simple phrases like, "I can speak English," "I'm learning every day," or "I need to practice more." At first, she would think in her native language, Spanish, but gradually, she found herself thinking in English. As a result, she could easily form sentences and express her thoughts more naturally. Thinking aloud in English is a powerful technique because it forces you to internalize the language. Instead of translating in your head, you start to think directly in English, which helps improve fluency and confidence. The more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. Through these experiences, I learned that language learning isn't just about memorizing vocabulary or grammar rules. It's about exposure, practice, and finding what works best for you. Whether it's through reading, speaking, listening, or thinking aloud, the key is consistency and persistence. Remember, don't be afraid to make mistakes. They're part of the learning process. The more you practice, the better you'll get. So, keep reading, keep speaking, and most importantly, keep enjoying the journey of learning English.
Subscribe to the channel and share this video if you found it valuable. Knowledge becomes more meaningful when it's shared.